Hello, and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. I feel so privileged you are taking time out of your busy life to learn all about the ways to interpret neurodivergence for you and your child. Remember, all advice on this podcast is general and may not specifically apply to your child, so we encourage you to also talk to your GP, paediatrician or specialist to see if what you've learned will help your family. Hello and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today was one of those conversations that I felt really privileged to be having because it really changed how I thought about interventions for my children. And I've been pondering what it means for quite a while after this discussion. So I really hope it does the same for you. We're going to be talking about considering supports and the right supports and interventions for your child. And we're having that discussion with Professor David Trembath from CliniKids today. So Professor David Trembath is a Senior Principal Research Fellow at CliniKids at the Kids Research Institute Australia. His research is helping all children on the autism spectrum have a healthy start to life, including kids who communicate mainly in ways other than speech. David joined CliniKids in 2022. He brings to the team over 20 years of clinical research experience in community, clinical education and university settings, and most importantly, the insights children and families have shared with him over these years that inform every aspect of his work. At CliniKids, you'll hear more about them during the podcast, but they're the first clinical service of the Kids Research Institute Australia, providing evidence-based therapies and supports for young children with developmental delays and or autism and their families. One of the unique aspects of CliniKids is the integration of clinical services with autism research. By working side by side, their exceptional team of researchers and clinicians put research into practice, providing families with access to tailored supports and the best evidence-based therapies in the world. So get ready for a really thought-provoking discussion. And I introduce Professor David Trembath. Hello, David. So incredibly excited to have you here today. I'm looking forward to a really informative conversation.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Carly. Thank you. And thanks for people who are tuning in. I know all have very busy lives, and so taking the time to listen to something like this, I really appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts.
So well said. So, David, can you start by explaining the incredible program that is CliniKids and how you're connected to it and how it's sort of different from other organisations and practices that parents and children might come in contact with?
Yeah, for sure. So CliniKids is based in Western Australia at the Kids Research Institute Australia, and it's been around for about 10 years. It's set up by Professor Andrew Whitehouse, who a number of people probably know. And the vision for CliniKids was to bring together clinical services, the best available research, and also training, so that there's a real wraparound approach to supporting kids and families, and then those who are seeking to support them. So I guess, our research or our program of work, there's a lot of work around trying to develop, evaluate, implement new ways of working, so supports and approaches that are all really aimed at helping kids have a healthy and happy start to life. We also do a lot of work around guidelines and frameworks, things that are meant to lift the standard of practice, consistency and the quality of practice across Australia for people who are working with kids and families. And a lot of our work is all about understanding community views and perspectives and needs and preferences and priorities, and trying to bring all of that together.
That's absolutely amazing. And to consider how rapidly evolving the space is around understanding and supporting neurodivergent children, to have it connected in with research so that you're kind of getting on the front foot and you're not having to wait for people and clinicians to have to learn about the research and then change their habits. I mean, that's just such an amazing advantage for children, especially because early intervention is absolutely everything. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to work. So I've been connected with the team for years now. We've done a lot of work together, but have only come across in a full-time capacity at the start of July.
Hmm.
And it's one of those things, the more and more I learn, and when I say learn, it's through talking with the clinicians in the team and the researchers, people behind the scenes with the operations and the training. It's like this common thread of just really genuinely wanting to work in ways that are helpful to kids and
Mm,
families, that are safe, they're effective, they're appropriate, but they're ultimately desirable to kids and families. It's their choice. But it kind of, what we've discovered is it works really well when we do work that's co-produced with the community. So by co-production, I mean we just do it together, you know?
mm, mm,
Ideas and the needs and the challenges that come from the community. We bring some of our perspectives from clinic or research or training and so forth, but we work out the problems and we work out potential solutions together. And yeah, that way of working is really kind of paying dividends. It's coming up with some good results, and I think helping to doing our part to push forward in terms of a much more inclusive and neuroaffirming approach to supporting kids and families in Australia, and sometimes we have a little bit of influence overseas as well.
I'm just going to, before we jump into our topic, I think that's a really incredible and important point, what you're talking about connecting with the community, with the directions. And it's really interesting to see how when the neuroaffirming movement really was understood and I think started to gain traction, it became less theoretical around what a neurotypical person would think would be beneficial for a neurodivergent person and became more about how a neurodivergent person could be better supported in the world in the way they wanted. And that is such a fundamental change. I think its
It
impact
was,
on, so we did a recent episode on comorbidities, and we will probably see in future years how that change in perspective will have had a huge approach on, change, I should say, impact on mental health.
mm,
Because being able to make neurodivergent people feel heard and seen, and that the the methods that are out there to support them fit their needs is definitely going to increase their sense of self-worth and their sense of visibility. And I think that's so important.
yeah, I agree completely. We've for decades, and when I kind of came into the field a little while ago, let's say over almost 25 years, we were taught it was pretty much all about the outcomes, and the outcome was to try to and please listeners, when I talk in these sorts of ways, I'm just trying to reflect how far we've come. It was like, let's see, people would talk about curing kids, when
Mm,
they were just developing differently, neurodiverse, and the outcomes were around, let's see how kind of close to this neurotypical, way we could help kids get, and outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. And what was wrong with all of that? Well, many things are wrong,
mm,
but why it ended up that way is we didn't think about the approach. We just kind of just jumped in and did things that we thought would be helpful without stopping for a minute and going, where did this way of working come from? How much involvement did kids and families and people who had grown up and been, exposed to or access those things, how much involvement have they had in
mm,
actually working out that approach?
mm.
And is it safe? Is it respectful? Is it appropriate? Is it wanted? So when I kind of look over the decades, I think the outcomes, what we're aiming for has changed, but very much because we've changed the approach.
Mm.
And some of the outcomes we probably don't even know, the positive things that are going to come from this. We can't even predict, at this stage, but positive impacts on mental health, that's already showing signs of being a really incredibly important change.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, so we came on today to have a chat around navigating services, systems, and supports. And we were talking before we came on air. We were actually talking about the fact that I had had a recent meeting with the Department of Education for funding for my Mr. Seven, and we were sort of discussing, I guess, what you would need to be able to advocate effectively. And it's quite funny how that little conversation fitted in so well with our topic. And I thought I might just ask you, when it comes to things like advocacy, how important do you think that is when it comes to being able to navigate those systems?
Mm. I don't know whether to use the word fortunate or unfortunate because it's critical. You know, why would I say each one? Fortunate. It's fortunate that advocacy is central to it because advocacy, I think at its heart, is saying, I know my kid, I know my child, I understand them, I have a connection with them that nobody will ever understand in the way that I do and their connection with me. And that's important and it matters. And that, yeah, I, as a parent or family member or family like person, I am in a position where I can help others see the beautiful person that I'm raising, you know, in all of their interesting kind of development and diversity and so forth. So that's a good part of advocacy, one of the good parts.
Mm.
Um, say it's kind of unfortunate because we shouldn't have to do this. Like it would be better, more appropriate if the system was better set up to say we expect diversity, we
Mhm.
welcome diversity, and we're just ready to learn and work out how to kind of work with kids and their families. A lot of the processes that people will be kind of asked to go through, whether it's to um, seek some information or advice from people in different capacities. Let's say it's an allied health professional or medical or in the education context. Oftentimes we see parents will have to kind of push or advocate or, really work for people to understand that there's an important question that they need answered. Might be a question about understanding or a question around where to get supports or a question on where are things heading, under different ways. So that can often be a real challenge. But even when you sort of make those connections, and there's a lot of decisions being made. That's when it comes to understanding kids' strengths, but also their support needs, and helping those who are working with them to be able to kind of see the whole picture, the full life, the everyday situations, as well as what happens in the 1 hour, the 2 hour, the phone call, or the session in the room. So it is it is important, and parents have a lot of weight on their shoulders, I think, in terms of advocating and helping those people see the full picture. And then, like, along the journey, I don't know, I imagine this isn't the first time you've been in a situation needing to advocate. Like, I don't know, I just think it must be incredibly exhausting because it's
Mhm.
not one, it's continuing.
Mhm.
And we hear time and time again, I don't know if your experience, but saying the same thing, giving the same information, having the same conversation. And it just, you know, so advocacy, yep, there's some incredibly important parts about it. Can be, my understanding is, really empowering when you feel like you can do it and you've got the system that allows you to do it. But it also really, really challenging. And the system shouldn't be set up to require that.
I do
Yeah, what
love
do
how
you?
you've mentioned, I love how you mentioned that it's the opportunity to let them know the child you know as their parent. And I just think that that's such a great little highlight that does come from advocacy because it lets you talk about your child above and beyond the diagnosis and the symptoms, and you can share those unique parts that make your child, and not somebody else's. So, yeah, you're right. It is very exhausting. You often repeat yourself, and when you were mentioning before about the difference in approaches where people used to think that you were looking to cure or get them to meet the neurotypical level. I mean, that's still so prevalent in so many spaces. A lot of spaces haven't actually changed there, they haven't evolved yet. It will come. The more these conversations happen, it will come. But I know as a parent that you can frequently have a conversation, the same conversation 8 times in a year with one person because they expect that the systems that are put in place to support the child will create a neurotypical child.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it is a very challenging part, but you're right. There's honor and joy in being able to represent the child that you have. And I think that's definitely worth recognizing in that. Um,
Yeah.
thank
What
you.
do you find, yeah, do you find like some people in international relations and diplomacy, they'll kind of talk about power and soft power, or, direct and indirect channels and whatnot. And advocacy, I guess, ultimately changes another person's understanding, their views, their behavior, right? Because
Mm.
they see things differently. Do you find, like, how do you approach it? Are there particular ways that you find are more effective for helping other people come around, understand, or do you find it's different for different people you've had to, you work with or have had to
It's
work with in some
definitely
cases?
different for different people.
Yeah.
And so some you will have conversations with people who, okay, the conversation we're having right now is the perfect
Mm.
example. This is a receptive conversation. You're wanting to learn about my experience from me. And so you'll be taking it on board from a neutral space or a positive space. And therefore, whatever I'm saying is something that you're going to absorb. And you're going to absorb it in a way where you're not going to think that I'm attacking you. I'm telling you that you're not doing a good job, that you're not going to get defensive.
Mm.
So that conversation's very different. It's very easily open. It's
Mm-hmm.
very easily comfortable, and you can share humor and all kinds of things in that sort of environment and really get the message across. But you can have very different conversations where you know that the person that you're going to be speaking to is automatically on the defensive before you've spoken to them. And that conversation
Mm-hmm.
is very, very different because you need to create empathy and compassion before you can actually start talking honestly about your child and their experience. Um, and so, yeah, those two approaches are really very different. And they, at the end, the energy level you have, the first way, it's quite joyous to be able to share what your experience is and who your child is and know that they're being seen and heard. And the other one is
Mm-hmm.
very exhausting. You walk out and you're like, I need a glass of wine or I need a coffee.
Yep.
Because they take a lot more out of you because you've really got to have you've got to think. You've got to have a script that is coming up as you're having the conversation, and that's a lot harder. I learned very early on that getting not aggressive, but
Mhm.
being too forthright makes the conversation harder and longer.
Right.
But then sometimes it's also necessary. So, when you've really got to put your child at the front and you know they're not being seen and heard, then sometimes it's what you have to do. You have to put the big girl pants on and
Yep.
yeah, and get a little bit stern and show that you know your child and you know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense. I've heard some parents I know and work with and whatnot. They'll say, I really struggle to advocate for myself, but when it comes to my child, I can kind of step outside of that and I can be almost like a different person. And they almost, yeah, learn to work out what are they advocating for here, themselves or their child. And both are equally like, important. Don't get me wrong, but
Mm.
sometimes consciously thinking, okay, what I'm about to do and go into that meeting and express these key points or make sure we come out with an agreement on A, B, or C. It's all for that reason. And if
Mm.
we sometimes start the conversation in the meeting to confirm this is the reason we're here and whatnot, that can also help feel a little bit more confident around how to approach it.
Mm.
But I sometimes think too, like, I do a lot of work in the allied health space, right? I'm a
Mm.
speech pathologist by background and connected with educators as well, early childhood educators and into school and so forth and other areas. But I tend to draw mostly on the allied health space because I know it well. And, people come out of university and they'll go straight into positions or early in their career or after changing career and often are being asked to make really big decisions about things without actually having a lot of life experience in that space or training or mentoring or support. And that's a particular challenge at the moment. And I think sometimes what happens is when there's a difficult issue and people don't feel confident, they tend to hold a much tougher line and almost put up a few defences to sort of say, look, this is the way it is, this is what we're going to do, and because it's hard to be vulnerable in that sort of
100%.
situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's why sometimes starting out, gently, gently, even if you think you're going to get hit with a with a wall, can knock a
Well,
few bricks down before you start the conversation, which is, that can be helpful too.
yeah.
So look, supports is such a huge, huge conversation, and there really are so many options and combinations, and there's such a thing as being over therapized and over supported as well for your children. So I would love you to have a chat to me about different supports, finding the balance, and how do we know what's right for our child? How do we make sure that we're giving our child enough, but not too much, so we're also still letting them be themselves?
They're such great questions. About 2 months ago, I was asked to present. CliniKids has like a quarterly online webinar seminar kind of thing. And the team said, hey, David, can you talk about like what's current best practice when it comes to supports for kids and families? And I'm like, that is a big topic. Maybe it's actually like a really big topic, but actually a really simple answer. I haven't got the simple answer, but I keep my mind open to the possibility that, maybe we do overcomplicate things sometimes. The way I approached it, I kind of started off with the idea of, okay, let's think about all of the research. What's the evidence say? And, whatnot. I thought, no, that's not really going to kind of hit the mark because it's bigger than that. We know that the research, that exists can only tell us some things about some support some of the time for some kids. So we've really got to take a much more holistic approach. So we take the research evidence, we listen to community about, when I say community, that's all members who have a perspective, people with lived experience, kids and young people and adults, as well as family members and people supporting them. We take that in, those insights. And when we kind of tie it in with what we're learning from the supports that are being provided and kind of what's working and not working in the real world, and we bundle it all together. So I was like, okay, I'm going to approach it in that way. And I ended up sort of saying, well, I'm just going to share my own thoughts about this based on sort of the different conversations and things I've read and seen and been involved in and so forth. And I asked our CliniKids clinicians to share the sort of questions they get asked by parents all the time who are just trying to find a way, the best way to support their kids. So I came back to quite a personal approach that I have seen and continue to see working incredibly well with, some people in my life. And it's quite simple. It's all about really for this young person, started off very young and now they're young, but they're growing up. But it was just all around trying to set things up so that they could be in as many places and spaces that are, in childhood as possible, interacting with lots of different people. Basically the idea that you try to make the world bigger, not just massive and quickly, but gently and deliberately. Try to make the world bigger. So what does that like mean though? That's a nice concept perhaps, but it means things like thinking about a 2-week period, what happens in this week and next week, and then thinking about the different activities that are happening. Let's say I do a lot of work in the early years space. So I'll use a kind of examples there. So there might be a couple of days of childcare. There might be a family member who's looking after your child on a particular day. There might be, sport, religious, cultural, different things that are happening, different activities. There might be some downtime. There might be some travel time. There might be some time where you really just trying to hold it all together. But if we look across those 2 weeks, then it's kind of like, well, the dream scenario would be that in each of those activities, there's either something about child's learning, so they're kind of developing new skills or new understandings, something about their participation, so they're getting to do something that's just part of childhood, and or something about their well-being that we're really focusing on. So being connected to nature, being connected with family, those types of things. And so if we look across the 2 weeks and go, these are the activities and these are the sort of things we're aiming for, then it's a matter of kind of trying to bridge the gap between where kids are now and where they or family would like them to be. So really, let's be a concrete example. At the moment, let's say they're going along they're trying to get involved in organised sport, so junior sport. This is an example I'm thinking from personal experience. And little person wants to play rugby league, The sibling plays rugby league, the parents have always loved rugby league. So they try and join the local club. They go along, connect with the team, and it's all really, really positive and people are welcoming and want to make it work. But when it comes to the sort of the day in, day out, the training session, the game day, all of those things, it's tricky, because this little person is fascinated by everything to do with rugby league, but just in a different way. They love the ball, they love the space and the open places. They're interested in sort of the equipment on the ground with the hats and the witches' hats and all of that sort of stuff. And there starts to become a bit of a disconnect because the coaches aren't quite sure what to do. Parents aren't quite sure how to approach it, and it's not really working as well as it could. So then we start to think, okay, well, what's the thing? What's the support that could make the rugby league training easier for that hour? That it's working for everyone in some sort of way. And then I kind of work out from there and I go, well, all right, well, what could be helpful? There's a whole lot of actually information around sort of inclusive sport and strategies. So maybe that could be helpful. Or maybe it's talking with people in the club and seeing, is there anyone in the the coaching, volunteer coaching staff, or anywhere else in the club who has experience raising kids who are developing differently? Or we might think, okay, well, we're connected with a speech pathologist or an OT or a psychologist. I wonder if we could ask them for some tips. Or perhaps the older sibling knows exactly how to kind of make things work. They've been doing it all their life. They might have some ideas. So where I'm going with this is the support, I kind of start with the activity and the goal and work out from there. I don't start with, I hear there's a speech pathologist, OT, psychologist, or these different therapists and supports, and I'll go and get one of those and then I'll work out how to use that time. I kind of work backwards. It might sound a bit kind of, what's the word for it? I don't know. It's a different way of approaching it, but the goal is that when we look across the week, the 2 weeks, mixture of activities, places, spaces and people, and the support is just enough. It doesn't need to be too much, and it comes from lots of different places. We think quite laterally and flexibly about what support means. Because often what I find is when people are, working with families and like, I'm not sure if he or she or they are getting enough support, I should be doing more. And we break it down and we look at all of the beautiful and clever and creative and helpful strategies and things that parents are doing to support their child. We're like, you're full of support, like you're doing an incredible amount. And it's just where things haven't quite been able to, work that you might go, okay, what else could be added to that? But I like to start with that sort of perspective. So I'm not going to kind of name a therapy or a support or a program.
Not at all. No, look, I think the magic of what you've just described is it's a child-centered approach. And so rather than going, here are all the tools that we have in our toolbox, what are we going to build based on the tools that we have? Instead, we're going to say, what is it we want to build? And then what tools can we use? And there's such a big difference for a child when it comes to that, because it's way more customized for their individual experience. And actually, I'm just listening to you say that and I'm thinking, oh my God, every time you come around to a new NDIS service agreement, your support person wants to talk to you. And this is like therapies and things. They want to talk about goals. And it's very important, but it's a very high kind of academic, theoretical concept when you just ask that question. What are your goals?
Yeah.
Whereas if someone was to say to you, what are the things that light up your kids' world every week and how do we want to make sure that they can access those? It's a completely different question.
Mm.
And you're actually getting much better data and a much better output for the child by asking something that is much more specific in a way, but also much more personal because, like if I think about 12 months of development for my child and I've got to come up with a goal, that's huge.
Mm.
But the difference between, and if I just talk chronologically, not developmentally, but the difference, let's say, between a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old and what they might want to do in their life, it's huge. And so to be able to help a parent narrow that vision down and see their child,
Mhm.
that's what I really love about what you've just said, because it lets the parent understand that what you're doing is specifically for your child, not, once again, not their label, not their disability, but for what your child wants to achieve.
Mhm.
I think that should be for all children across everything, like the education space. What does your child want to achieve? What makes their heart sing? How do we facilitate for that to happen? Like that's how you get rounded, beautiful, happy, mentally healthy children. But in this situation, especially because you're dealing with something so vulnerable, so fragile, it's definitely so important. I
Yeah.
also, I just want to take a moment to recognize something that you said, and it made me smile when you said it. And that is that a lot of parents don't recognize the therapeutic work that they are doing at home every day. That just because they're not a support worker, they're not a therapist, it doesn't mean that they're not doing incredible growth for their children. And we do it so subconsciously because it's done through love and knowledge that we don't recognize it. And you are such a fundamental part. Every parent who's listening, you are such a fundamental part of all of the support strategies that are happening for your child. And when you facilitate for them to be able to eat dinner, or when you create an environment that's comfortable for them to come home from school, or whatever it is that you're doing, that is providing support.
It really is. If for people listening, I hope everyone who is listening has been told many, many times that they're doing a good job, because honestly, I've never met a parent, a caregiver, or a family-like person who, when they're involved in bringing up a kid who, with all of their diversity and their different, kind of ways of understanding the world and people around them, never met anyone who isn't pouring every single thing they have into trying to do the best job they can. Genuinely, but I've just never met anybody. And so, like, recognizing that, and taking a moment to say, yes, you're doing a good job, you're doing a beautiful job, and that the support you're providing is absolutely the 99% of what will make them grow up to be to reach all of their full potential, to have as big a life as they possibly can, and to have a great experience of life. But I also, at the same, not a but, sorry, and also, it's really important though that the community gets behind you. Like, you deserve it. You shouldn't have to be asked for it. There should be a knock on the door and can I help you? And that's how we've got to get the system towards that way of working, instead of an application and a case for argument for why you should get support in your child, should get support. That's all the wrong way around. So I feel like it's important to really recognize everything you're doing, and it's okay and it's right to be frustrated, annoyed, and or angry, when the support isn't forthcoming. Yeah.
I love that that's a mountain that you believe in climbing, because it's so incredibly true. But have we got a long way to go? I sat down not too long ago to actually think about administration, and
Mm-hmm.
just the administration that having three, in my circumstance, three neurodivergent children, one who's got relatively high needs, One that probably, it's just one of those really funny things that sometimes when you step back and think about it, is actually got reasonably significant needs. But because the other one is higher, it doesn't feel
Yep.
as big, if that makes sense.
It
Context is
does.
everything. And another one that sort of just needs a little bit of support and intervention. And I was thinking about, in that context, how much of my time is spent in organising appointments, doing paperwork, logging invoices, et cetera, et cetera. And I worked out it was 6 hours a week.
Yep. I'm not surprised, are you? Mm.
And that's enormous. That's enormous. And to think, I mean, oh my goodness, what's my maths going to be like? 6 times 52. Like, if you think about how much time you're spending every year on that and what that time could be doing, it's just such an enormous task. And then the other thing that goes along with that is that a lot of the paperwork and a lot of the administration and a lot of the systems that you have to work in are still deficit based.
Mm-hmm.
So you're spending your time while you're doing that justifying the needs of your child and therefore having to talk about them in a much more negative way than you like to normally think about them. And that is also, it's just not an ideal headspace for a parent to have to be sitting in all of the time of justifying what's, and I'm using talking marks for those not watching the YouTube, wrong with your child.
Yeah.
And so you're right. The system is backwards. The moment that you need additional assistance, so something big has happened, whether it's a developmental change, something in your life has changed, and you're like, right now I'm not coping. I really need someone to give me some tools to assist me with what's going on with my child to help the family work better. The first thing they're going to say is, can you fill in this form?
Yep.
Can we set up a STAR assessment so we can kind of work out what your need is? And you're like, but I'm bottom of the barrel. This is why I'm here and I'm asking you for help. And you're handing me a piece of paperwork. So it's really interesting to hear a practitioner and someone who's in the system see that and say that because it is I would say it's one of our biggest flaws.
I agree. I think imagine if we're thinking in terms of the situation or an outcome, it's either bad, it's okay, or it's good. The vast majority of time and energy, emotional energy, people's time and resources are spent just trying to get from bad to okay. Not even okay to good. So when it comes to asking for support, generally the starting point is bad. It's not going to be available. Let's work and advocate and try and provide all of this evidence and supporting information and, share things about our life we shouldn't have to share with a stranger just to get to an okay level of support, let alone sort of go beyond that and be in the positive space where you're like, okay, this is actually adding something to my life rather than just filling the gap that's been created because, I don't have the support I need. So it's hard. These talking about these things, I imagine people will be listening and thinking, yep, that's exactly where I'm at. And I think though it's important to talk about it and call it out for what it is because the more of us who can label it or identify what the issue is, just going from bad to okay, not okay to good, I feel like just a tiny little bit of, the world can change with each time we identify the problem really clearly, and then hopefully it helps to just influence us moving towards better solutions. But yeah, it is. It's really tiring, and yeah.
I'm gonna share a quick little anecdote, just as an example, and it kind of, to be honest, it breaks my heart, and I feel lucky that we haven't gotten to this point of desperation. But so as we've mentioned, my children come from originally from the child protection space. And that comes along with, on top of other parts of their neurodivergences, that means that they all have an element of trauma. And trauma can show up in a range of different ways. And It isn't immediately always recognised. And so I'm part of a particular Facebook group of a lot of parents whose children in their families have come from that particular pathway. And it is all too often that you see the story and somebody on there calling out for help and camaraderie and connection because the child in their care has gotten to their early teen years. Their support needs have not been recognised early on significantly enough. They haven't had the funding given to them to be able to provide enough psychology or whatever it is that's been needed. And they hit the early teen years and hormones are there. They can't understand their identity, which is normal for a teenager, but they're dealing with all of the things that come with that space. I'm no longer my birth family, et cetera, et cetera. And the families end up, you see them implode because that teenager's grappling with massive mental health issues, often physically, and that then is taken out on parents and other siblings who are all trying to do the very best they can in a very loaded and complicated situation. And what we see time and time again in that space is that it is not until the parents actually threaten the department with rescinding the child from their care that they get the actual support that should have been given to them in the first place.
Right.
And you'll hear my voice is actually croaking because it's just such a frustrating, horrible thing. And it's a failure on so many levels. It's a failure to the family. It's a failure to the community. And it's a failure to that individual child for the child to have to get to that point to get what they need. And I know this wasn't our original topic of conversation, but it's come up. So, side quest. And I just look at that and I go, how do we fix that? How do we fix it that a child has to get to the point where they're 13 or 14, they're self-harming, they're threatening their adoptive parents, they're running away, and the parents have to turn to the department and say, our family cannot do this anymore before somebody steps in to support all of them. And if it had have happened when that child was 2, when that child was 3, it overwhelms me, to be completely honest. And yeah, it's exactly what we're talking about, that we're waiting until people are dire before we're letting them be anywhere close to okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I've heard anecdotes, stories where, that sort of situation happens, a person in out-of-home care, thinking about someone in particular, and, all of those things unfold, and then situation becomes dangerous and they're told to go to the hospital. But this isn't a medical issue. And what happens, you're then in a hospital, which is the wrong context for supporting, this situation. It's kind of like if you wait long enough, most of the options are not going to be very good, and probably sometimes compound things. But on the other side, so there's a huge kind of, there's a huge cost in not getting this right for a bunch of reasons. Obviously the impact on the kids, young people, the families and those around them. There's the impact in terms of it's an inefficient way. If you go really step back and just be really kind of, about it, you go, this is a really inefficient way to support people and to use resources. But on the other side of it, it's like this missed opportunity. And, people sometimes say, well, why is an individualized approach important? Or why is it important to be neuroaffirming and so forth? And some people, the general answer I hear is, well, because everyone's different. Often the same, if you met one person with autism, on the spectrum, or who's autistic, you met one autistic person. And that's 100% true. But what I tend to say is, if we don't take that approach, we miss out on the magic. We miss out on the opportunity to do amazing things. So as I kind of think about these issues, I can see it on both sides. And I think trying to, I don't know, I've been in lots of group situations, whether it's sort of professional, let's say at a conference or a meeting or a, whatnot, or a community situation where it's people coming together in sort of forums and focus groups and whatnot. And I tend to find when we spend most of the time talking about the problems, it's important, absolutely, and really, really important to be clear and to see them, and for people not to feel isolated when they're experiencing them, and to be, for us, like in a professional capacity, to be aware and understanding and sensitized and so forth. But time and time again, the solution is on the other side of it, which is if we can just embrace this difference and this way of understanding other people and the world around them, then that time and time again, works. And it's easier to kind of, when you're trying to build a workforce of people who are able to be helpful, it's focusing on the positives for them too, which is the best path forward. So, yeah, what am I trying to say, I guess, in this? Like, people will be listening and thinking about the challenges but also the opportunities, and what's the way to fix the system? My feeling is it's an absolute acute and deep understanding of the issues, for a major commitment to the opportunities and taking it that way. And I think we're too much on the not close enough to the opportunity focused approach. Best for everyone in every way.
Coming back, using our roadmap, getting away from our side quest. Returning to what we were talking about supports. I think it'd be really interesting to hear where would you start? And by that I mean, you were talking about how you look at the child and you look at the weeks, and then, so for families listening and they're like, that sounds amazing. Who's the first person I need to go and speak to make sure that's what's happening for my child?
Yeah, great question. I talk a lot about this idea of a helpful person, and there's a number of qualities of a helpful person, right? They're connected to you in some way, but they're in particular connected to the community, and they understand sort of the context. Helpful person will be ready to listen and able to listen, and I guess listen more than suggest. For every one part suggest, it should be 2 parts or 3 parts listen. And they should be sound. When they do offer advice, it should be sound. It shouldn't just be kind of intuition. It should be, we've got enough of a foundation to be able to suggest kind of evidence-based. And I just mean evidence-based in that it comes from somewhere that isn't just kind of made up. And they should be able to be like ready to kind of walk with you along the way, not just a once off, or you should feel like they're in some way connected for the longer term, because to understand you and your child and family, you need to see it over time. We can't learn in an hour or a week or a month. You really need to see things over time. And I say helpful person because the way like our society is kind of, a lot of societies is set up at the moment is the helpful person is synonymous with a professional. They're in education, or they're in allied health, or a GP, or a nurse practitioner. They're, community services, social work, and so forth. And these people absolutely can be that person. There's no question about that as well. But I also just think sometimes the helpful people I see who are most helpful, they don't have those qualifications or training or background. They come from different parts of life, and which can be very different in different cultural and community contexts as well. So I kind of think the first thing I do is work out who's on your team, who is the helpful person and all the helpful people, hopefully, because they're kind of your safe space. They're a trusted person. You can be real with them. You can share. You don't have to talk your child down in order to get more, this or that. And you can be optimistic with them about the future and now as well. Like, you can be real, and they'll be with you and along the way. Once you have that person worked out, or people, hopefully, I think you're in a better position to then sort of start to make some decisions around, like, what's happening now, what you'd like to be different, and then to kind of talk through the different options. And I'd say taking a bit of time to talk is really helpful. So, for example, you might say, okay, things are falling apart a bit at school. Started prep, we're in term 2, term 1 kind of went okay. Prep or kindergarten, depending where you are in Australia. First year of formal schooling. Term 1 kind of went okay. I think, to be honest, child was just in kind of shell-shocked, just a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing, and just kind of just went along with it. But term 2, that it started to get more difficult and whatnot. And when I say difficult, it's not the child being difficult, it's the fit. It's and so it's like, okay, now let's start to think through and talk through the different options. And, you might then think, okay, who else is in a position to potentially be a helpful person? You reach out to them, and hopefully the teacher and people in the school and so forth are. You might start to think, okay, well, who else or what else in the network, might be helpful. So I kind of work outwards in that way. But I guess where I kind of said the same thing earlier, I don't tend to say things are difficult at school, I need a therapist A, B, or C, or this particular role. I work out almost like the requirements. What is it you need? And then the different people, or the different ways you might be able to meet the need, and then go from there. So first step, helpful person. Second step, kind of, to the extent possible, step back and look at what the couple of weeks look like. Third step, kind of double down on the things that are working, kind of call them out for what they are. Like this, going to the park is the very best thing for my child at the moment in the 2-week period. I don't care how many sort of days at childcare or therapies or supports or whatnot. They're happiest. Their heart rate's probably the lowest, or high with excitement. That's the very best thing for them. Or it could be any other activity, but double down on those things that are helpful and working. And then I guess after that, it's like being curious, kind of what else might change or add or stop in order to open up a space where new things can happen. Because sometimes it's what we stop doing that kind of creates the best opportunities for new things to kind of start.
I'm nodding emphatically there. And it's actually...
Does any of it resonate? We've kind of gone from practical to very esoteric.
No, look, there's a couple of practical things as I'm listening to it that I feel like I could chuck into the parents to give them some suggestions. And I will come back to that. But the thing what you said at the end about sometimes it's the things you stop. Sometimes it's the things you remove that can make all the difference. And there's a really interesting... We want so much for our children. And, there's every parent has a dream child. The child that when they were coming along, they imagined who this child was going to be, what they were going to want to do, who they were going to grow up to be. And I think, part of being a parent is the undoing and reforming of that dream child so that instead of it being our dream, it becomes theirs.
Right.
And I think sometimes when you've got children who you see them struggle to feel like they're fitting in, that they're getting the most out of the world, you want to offer them everything. And you're giving them swimming lessons, and you're giving them drama, and you're giving them tennis lessons, and they're doing, and because you want them to have the chance to be part of it. And sometimes stepping back and observing and going, they're actually not comfortable in that space. And I think they want that. But do they want that? Have I asked them if they want that? And So sometimes it is the removal, sometimes it's things like, and I can say this personally, it's something I had to go through. I'm an extrovert. For anyone who hadn't worked that out listening to the podcast, you won't be having 8 ball. I'm an extrovert. And so I love festivals, events, cultural activities, like they light me up. I've
Mm.
got 2 extroverts who are the same and they really
Yeah.
love that. And my oldest wants to be an extrovert, but his regulation system does not at all. And
Right.
so I used to feel really guilty if I didn't take him to the things we were doing because it felt like I was then removing him from the opportunity to participate. And I
Mm.
needed to sit back at one point and go, hold on. If I'm choosing to go to this, maybe I need to ask him and give him the choice as to whether or not it's something that he wants to do and give him
Mm.
the
Mm.
option to feel like he can opt out. And so there's been a few times in the last few months where things have happened that I've gelled with. My 7-year-old and my 5-year-old have really gelled with the idea of, and Mr. 9 has not. And we've actually taken the steps to find an activity that he would like to do that day with
Mm-hmm.
somebody that he connects with, or we go and do that. And it's worked brilliantly for all of us. And I've had to accept my own dream child guilt about
Yep.
what I was kind of forcing onto Mr. 9 and instead let him tell me what it was that he was going to enjoy in that situation. So that's why when you said that, I was like, that's such a light bulb. And I suppose I also want to recognize that it sounds like a simple soundbite, but it's actually very hard for a parent to do because sometimes it's an admission within yourself that you don't have to push that so hard. And that can be complicated.
Absolutely. This is, kind of a constant conversation at home in our family with our kids and sort of the things that they're doing or not doing and so forth. But, you look around a group of kids, when they're sort of early primary school, and it'll be different depending on a whole range of factors, but you often see extracurricular kind of stuff. There's a music lesson or a swimming lesson or a drama kind of thing, or there's a religious connection or cultural, activity and so forth. But the things that aren't sort of really close and personal, lots of kind of extra stuff. And then you kind of think, you look around at the adults that and you kind of go, well, okay, how many of them are still doing like music lessons or drama classes or swimming lessons or X, Y, or Z? And it's like, my point is, the vast majority of these things stop. There'll be in
Mm.
time when your child's in upper primary or early high school or later high school where they say, I don't want to do that anymore. And at that point, we'll go, oh, okay, we agree with you. But why don't we agree earlier on when they're clearly showing us that something else, like that's not right and or something else could be better? We might, it's more efficient if we just go back to that very kind of clinical approach, but it's much more human as well to kind of go, I hear, I see what you're saying. This isn't a critical thing. Why don't we do it differently? And just kind of, instead of just kind of pushing and pushing. So whenever I'm kind of thinking, whatever it is, when we're kind of reviewing supports with the family, and it's like, well, we're doing, some therapy sessions here, and we're doing some lessons over here and this activity over here. And it's like, one of the questions I'll often ask is, oh, when do you think they'll stop? And particularly around the therapies, it's often never been discussed. Like the therapist, not, when are we stopping? And just kind of challenging ourselves to, by asking that question could be sometimes really quite helpful, and it can let us lose some of the guilt of that we might feel in terms of stopping things, because so yeah, that's part of it in my mind. I also think every time, like we know, right, from the broader kind of broad community, including kids and research around kids with really, really complex, multiple profound learning disability or intellectual disability, that having opportunities to make your own decisions, to take risks, and for those decisions and risks and things like that to be, listened to and responded to is essential for developing agency, self-confidence, capacity to advocate for yourself, capacity to be safe. And so sometimes we, it might seem like a simple thing. Do you want to go to that family get together with friends or whatever, or not? And kind of, it's like, oh, I really should be there. And, but every time kids make a little decision about their life that is reasonable and, doesn't affect things about their future or, doesn't close their world, they're learning to make a decision, other people to listen, and get stronger and stronger and stronger every time we practice it. So it's kind of hard in the moment, they've got a different view on something or they want to take it a different way, or that I think the questions are, does it really matter?
Yeah.
And if not, what can we get out of this situation by then developing that confidence and sense of self and agency to make a call about their own lives, because it'll help them and it'll protect them and it'll open up the world for them, in the future.
I love that. That's such a great way to look at it. The growth of the sense of self by being able to make choices. That's fantastic. The other thing, when I was listening to you before and you were talking about, the helpful person and then creating something that made you understand what supports were right rather than going for supports that were available. And I was thinking that it's kind of like, so I used to be a small, sort of still am, but I'm working my way out of being a small business owner. Had to employ and been a team leader and things a lot. So I've had to employ people before. And the best way to employ somebody is to think about the skill that the things they need to do, and then the skills for that, and then who is most suitable for that. And I feel like write a job description. If you're trying to work out what supports are needed and listening to what you're saying, I'm like, write a job description. I need somebody who can help my child feel like they can feel comfortable throwing a basketball. I need somebody who's going to help my child feel confident when they walk into the room at school, because at the moment they feel like they don't fit. Like create that job description and then go, so who does this? Rather than I've got these supports around me and they can probably help with this. So that's my hands-on tip from what you were saying.
I love it. I don't usually talk a lot about my kids in a work context, but I think this is one which it kind of makes sense. One of our kids, is very kind of, people describe in lots of different ways. Some people say, they're shy. Some people say they, kind of just really confident in themselves. Some people say, and they know their own mind, and lots of different descriptions. But when it comes to, and this is going back a couple of years, coming to that situation in life where if you're going to kind of have a big world, it helps to be able to feel confident, comfortable, just being around other people, so, just connecting even in a small way, because from little connections, it opens up the opportunity for bigger connections. And you can kind of take this in a couple of different ways. Imagine, let's say we just use common language, kid who's really shy. It's not the right description, but it might kind
lets people understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And so you can go down a few different approaches with this. But when we wrote the job description, really, if I think back what the job description would have been, I didn't write it, but I wish I had it. It would have been, we need someone with a big heart, or people with big hearts, people who are confident in themselves, so that they won't be offended or upset or kind of put off if this little person doesn't respond to them. People who see fairly regularly, and probably in a bit of a semi-structured environment where like the meeting and the stuff that happens after that will kind of happen in the same way each time. And it's good if this person knows kids and has seen lots of kids, because that will then, they kind of, might have some insights and even some tricks or tips to make, kind of that interaction go easier. And so that job description, I think you could say, well, there's a bunch of other health people who are probably pretty good at that, or educators. But the person who got the job is one of the coaches at the local footy club, and
Mm,
our
mm.
person joined the footy club, and this person, over and over, time and time again, gently, with a big open heart, just said, "Hey," and tried to offer a high five or a fist pump or whatnot. We have been in, let's call it, years of AFL therapy, right? It's been going on for years, and the change over that time, because of those people, that one person in particular, I won't name, but I absolutely picture him, and he does it for lots of kids. These people who just created that space, provided that opportunity, were steady in their approach, and saw the big picture and the long-term view. They've helped my little person open up and just, really connect with people in the club and the whole thing. And now it's one of the highlights of the week to be in that space. So I love it. I love it, Carly. The idea of the job description. What have they got? And then who might fill that job? And rather than, I just love it.
I love also that you've just flagged the beauty of relationship and connection as its own form of therapy as well. And that when we think of support, sometimes that's the support that our child needs, is that extra relationship, that extra connection that feels like it's theirs. And it's where they can be exactly who they are, and that person isn't tied to anybody else. It's just for them. And yeah, that can be so medicinal for them as well. And that just came through with what you just said then too. And I think that's so important, whether it is a family friend that they click with, whether it's, a teacher, or whether you manage to find the support worker for them that they really gel with and who will let them be their authentic self. There's so much medicine in a beautiful connection.
Yeah, it's so true. Often, people say, they're working with different therapists and whatnot over time. And I say, who are the good ones? Because I'm always keen to know who's in the community who seems to be doing a good job. And so you get some names, and then you say, why are they good? And they say, oh, they just got this, and they can't really describe it. And they never, I don't think anyone's ever said, oh, they deliver program X, or they're really well trained in program Y. People sometimes talk about the art of that interaction, that relationship or whatnot. But it's like often the active ingredient, that is actually really having most of the effect, just that connection and the way it makes people feel, and the confidence it creates and all those things. So yeah, I agree.
I think that that's a beautiful place to finish, because we have shared so many stories with each other and come around to so many places. And it feels quite perfect to say that connection and rapport is a beautiful thing to make sure you're always including in the recipe for your child. I really want to thank you for your authenticity and your openness during this conversation, David. I think it's just been fantastic. And also I've really loved that it hasn't been the traditional viewpoint of get these people on and these are the things you need. And if you do that, you're going to solve this problem. It's amazing to hear the conversation center around the individuality of the child, and that it is okay for your approach. In fact, it's fundamental for your approach to be individualized to that special little person in your life. And what a gift to give to our parents to be able to take that away. So I'm so grateful. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, Carly, thanks so much for the opportunity to connect. One of the things I learned early, the first important lesson I learned sort of starting out as a speechy, that was that I really didn't know anything. But if I could listen and spend time with parents who did, then kind of pass some of those things on to the next parent and then on to the next parent, then maybe I could at least just be a little bit helpful in sharing ideas. So everything I share is all the things people have told me, and, it's nice to be able to share some of that here today, and really appreciate the opportunity to connect and have a chat. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Be sure to check the show notes on our website for any links and references. You can find us at youcangrowyourownway.podbean.com. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love you to help us get the word out. You can share the podcast, tell a friend, and be sure to click the follow or subscribe button so you can access all our new episodes. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we would love to connect with you. You Can Grow Your Own Way recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this place, now known as Australia. We're coming to you from Jabberung, Jawajali and Wadawurrung country, the country of our guest speaker, and from wherever you are listening. We respect the elders of the past and present, and we share our friendship and kindness.